By the way, I'm Vinny B. I'm sitting in for JT the Brick from noon to 2 o'clock today. And we are talking about Ashton Jeanty. Clint Kubiak said, look, we're not holding him back. We want to put more pressure on him, and we want to use him a lot. And why not? That's what I say. The Raiders drafted Ashton Jeanty 6th overall in last year's draft with every intention of getting everything out of him. Not to the point of abuse or anything like that. We're not talking about that. But Ashton Jeanty is a young man with young legs and has star potential and can hurt you in the run game, in the pass game. He's a good blocker. He's an all-around running back. And why not tap into that as much as you possibly can? That is what you drafted him for, and that's what we're going to ask you. What are your expectations for Ashton Jeanty in year 2? Last year was kind of a miraculous year for him when you think about it, and I was there at every single game watching him get pummeled, for lack of a better word, behind the line of scrimmage time and time again, or right at the line of scrimmage time and time again, yet still had a nice rookie season. It wasn't the season that a lot of people maybe had hoped for him coming off the career that he had at Boise State in terms of the volume of yards and all that stuff. But you draft somebody like that, you're thinking 1,300 yards, 600 yards receiving. That sort of a season. He obviously didn't do that, but he still had 975 yards on 266 carries, 3.7 yards per carry. That none of which, any of those numbers are his fault. He didn't have any help. He's a guy that is capable of averaging over 4 yards per carry, getting a bunch of catches. Getting well over 1,000 yards. And I think Clint Kubiak and the Raiders understand that, and so they're not in any mind to restrict him, to prohibit him, to put any handcuffs on him, to monitor him, to manage him. Again, they're not going to do anything irresponsible, in an irresponsible way, but they're going to use him. And the name Christian McCaffrey, who Clint Kubiak obviously knows really well. He was a coach in San Francisco while Christian was there, so got a chance to see that firsthand. And by the way, we will have Kirk Morrison is going to join us at 1:30. Jessie, Merrick from Silver and Black is going to be here with us at 12:30. Can't wait to get their thoughts on all this. So Jessie at 12:30, Kirk at 1:30, and we're going to talk about Ashton Jeanty and what the Raiders' expectations are for him, and we want your thoughts, 702-365-9200. But you look at Christian McCaffrey, right? And I think even the 49ers talk about we got to cut him back. We got to find a second running back. We got to manage him a little bit more. Well, 29 years old last year, carried the ball 311 times for 1,202 yards. He also had, get this, 102 catches for 924 yards. Christian McCaffrey is somebody that I think the Raiders see a lot of Ashton Jeanty in. It might not look exactly the same in terms of their running style, but the impact that they can have in the run game as busting tackles, making people miss, being tremendous in the open field, being home run threats every time they touch the ball, whether it's in the run game or the pass game, in screens down the field. We saw Ashton excel on wheel routes. I think we're going to start seeing him excel more in the screen game, short yardage situations, getting him out in space on zone reads. He's the entire package. So when you're talking about Clint Kubiak talking about we want to put pressure on him, more from Ashton Jeanty, more of Ashton Jeanty. And by the way, nobody is happier to hear that than Ashton Jeanty, who flat out said yesterday, I don't want to come off the field. And I know that the Raiders drafted Mike Washington, and I think he's a fabulous football player, and there will be a role for him on this football team. Yes, there will be times when Ashton Jeanty simply has to come off the field. You can't give him the ball every time. That's obvious. So there will be a role for Mike Washington. But Ashton Jeanty loves to hear what he heard from the coach, because as he told us yesterday, that's how he's thinking. If I don't have to be off the field, and then I don't want to be off the field. There's too much that I could do for this football team as a runner, as a pass catcher, as a blocker. And going back to Christian McCaffrey, that was last year's numbers. He's had 1, 2, 3, four seasons of over 700 yards receiving. 1 year where he had 1,000 yards receiving. 1 year with 867. Last year with 924. By the way, he's 29 years old doing that, still being able to do that. So, and the years where he didn't were years where he just suffered, unfortunate injuries. Remember, early on in his career, there were some injury issues. So, of course, you have to manage it. You have to monitor it. You don't want to run Ashton into the ground, but I think the Raiders have a tremendous training staff. They have a tremendous planning, a plan in place for an Ashton Jeanty and all the players on their team to make sure that they're not overusing anybody. But any kind of a thought of really baking into the game plan some sort of a managed plan where he's getting the ball 60% of the time and Mike Washington's getting it 40% of the time, or somebody, whoever steps up as that second running back. I don't know that that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be 75 to 80% of the time with Ashton Jeanty out there on the field. And then, have somebody that comes in there, and probably will be Mike Washington, filling in when he can and having a nice role for himself. But Ashton Jeanty is the type of running back that can do these types of things. That's why, again, you drafted him. That's why Christian McCaffrey was drafted where he was drafted. In an era, and it was a little bit less so back in 2017, believe it or not. It sounds like that's so long ago. It really isn't, but in football years it is. The way things were being looked at that point, I think, was the beginnings of where running backs started being viewed the way they are in today's times, as far as, you don't want to invest that high of a draft pick in them. The positional value just isn't there. We see Jeremiah Love getting drafted second overall, a fabulous football player, Superman, really. But when you draft a running back that high, you're making him, because everything is slotted now in terms of the pay, he gets paid as the second pick overall, which makes him the highest, get this, the highest paid running back in the league right now. He instantaneously, before even stepping foot on the field, becomes the highest paid running back in the league. I guarantee you right now, this is obvious, it goes without saying, but in case you didn't know, that doesn't work with Fernando Mendoza. Fernando Mendoza being the first pick overall, who will make more money than Jeremiah Love, will not even come close, not even near the highest paid quarterback world, right? It's like millions upon millions of dollars away from that. That's one of the values or great values of picking a quarterback that high, and him hitting especially, is because now you have a quarterback that's not getting paid quarterback type money, which puts a serious drain, obviously, on your salary cap. You can spend the next 4 years or so, usually about 3, but maybe let's just say 4, being able to build a team around a great quarterback at a fraction of the cost that you normally pay great quarterbacks, whereas the reverse is in effect here, because running backs, their numbers and their salaries have gone down and down and down over the years. Jeremiah Love at number 2 instantaneously becomes the highest paid running back in the league. Make it make sense, I know, but it just kind of is what it is. But Christian McCaffrey drafted where he was drafted in the top 10 in his draft, and Ashton Jeanty obviously being drafted top 6 in his draft. I hate to say it this way, but if you're going to invest that highly in a running back, you want to get the bang for your buck, because, again, they become really high paid running backs in the league simply because of where running backs are getting paid nowadays. The top of the market for running back is nowhere near what it is for other premium positions like a quarterback or a defensive end, an offensive tackle, left tackle specifically. So you have to even just justify making that pick, you have to get the most out of it, especially at this time. And at this time, unlike a quarterback where you're getting a bargain, you're not getting a bargain. If you're the Arizona Cardinals, you are not getting a bargain in Jeremiah Love. You're actually paying him more guaranteed money than any running back in the league right now. So think of it from that perspective. Now you kind of have to make sure you maximize that investment, because that investment is a pretty big darn investment. But all that said, the point of the matter is Ashton Jeanty is a really good football player and an extremely important football player to the success of the Raiders. If you can get Ashton Jeanty playing the way he's capable of playing, and it's not even about him necessarily. Yes, obviously he has to go out there and do that, but I have no concerns whatsoever that if you block for Ashton Jeanty the way you're supposed to, he's going to be a fabulous football player. We saw glimpses of that last year with zero help. And when I say zero help, I'm literally saying zero help. I mean, it's hard to believe I'm even saying that, but it was zero help because of the injuries to Colton Miller and Jackson Powers Johnson, because of the dysfunction that was going on the offensive line, because of some inadequacies in terms of the personnel on the offensive line, because of Chip Kelly doing things his way and Brendan Carroll, the offensive line coach, not just doing a bad job, basically. I'll just put it that way. And the lack of cohesion on that offensive line. There was zero help that Ashton Jeanty got last year, and he still had over 900 yards rushing. Almost, could have had 1,000 yards. Was that close to 1,000 yards? It kind of tells you, when you're close to 1,000 yards, averaging 3.7 yards per carry, it kind of lets you know what that mark means. It doesn't mean what it used to mean back in the day, and it's obvious. Guys were doing that in 14 games back in the day. Then it was 16 games. Now it's 17 games, soon to be 18 games. So obviously, the more games you play, the more chances you have to get to that 1,000-yard mark. So that shouldn't be the goal ever for Ashton Jeanty. To me, the goal should be 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 yards. And a bunch of yards in the receiving game, because he's literally capable of doing that. So what are your thoughts on the matter? 702-365-9200. What are your expectations for Ashton Jeanty in year two? And it's funny because, hearing Clint Kubiak talk about Ashton, talk about Brock Bowers, everyone got a big laugh out of how he described Brock Bowers, what was it? A robot from a football robot from heaven, and thank God for that, which he is. We call him the natural. He could pick up a golf club. He could pick up a baseball bat. Heck, you could probably take him down to Texas for a year and train him to be a decathlete. You could probably train him to be a high hurdler. He's just a Superman in terms of athletic ability. We all had, I'm not going to sit here and say we all went to school with the Brock Bowers, but we all went to school with somebody like a Brock Bowers, the guy that was in our neighborhood, the best athlete, just could do whatever the heck he wanted to do. I had a friend who hit a game-winning basketball shot in high school, pitched a perfect game in high school, and also had a game-winning 3-run home run in high school, hit game-winning shots in basketball, and so he was that dude, he was that dude. Shout out to Joey Seiler for being that dude, and we all knew those kind of guys. Well, Brock Bowers in the NFL is literally that kind of a guy. Imagine being that kind of a guy when you're playing alongside and performing alongside the 1% of the 1%, or there's just the 1% of the entire universe. But of that 1% of the entire universe, which makes up the NFL rosters every year, there's still an upper echelon to even that 1%. It's the 1% of the 1%. And that's what Brock Bowers is. And it's just kind of astonishing. So to hear Clint Kubiak talk about Brock Bowers in that way, and as we get to know Clint Kubiak more and more, I think understated might be the way to describe him. He's not going to be throwing around compliments. He's not going to be John Gruden up there doing a comedy routine. He's not going to be, definitely not going to be saying that that this player reminds him of that player. We saw that with John, and John was great, and we loved covering him, and we wish him the best always. But that's not the personality that you're getting from Clint Kubiak. So when he says something like he said about Brock Bowers, calling him a Cadillac, a stud, a this, or that, it means something. And I mean, even to our untrained eyes necessarily, how could you not see that from Brock Bowers? I remember what he did as a rookie. Unfortunate season for him last year. But the point is that when you have guys like Ashton Jeanty and you have guys like Brock Bowers, and now you're bringing in a quarterback that has all the necessary ingredients to be an elite quarterback, and you bring in a Tyler Linderbaum, who's one of the best centers in the game of football, not just in the division or in the conference, all of football. He's one of the best to do it. You bring him in. That's an elite football player. You've got Colton Miller, who year in and year out is a top 5 offensive tackle. Some years he's a top 3 offensive tackle. He's an elite player. So that's right there. Obviously it's still on paper. It's still potential. with some of these guys outside of Brock Bowers, outside of Tyler, outside of Colton Miller. Ashton Jeanty's got to go out there and do it now, and we think he will. I think he will. He just needs the help now. Fernando Mendoza needs to go out and do it. It's a little bit of a different story with him. He's got to prove that what he did in college is now transferable to the NFL. But I think he's gonna outwork everybody. I think he's gonna leave no stone unturned, and I think he's going to maximize his abilities just as he did in college. And if he does, the Raiders are going to have a fantastic quarterback on their hands. If they have a fantastic quarterback behind a good offensive line, along with elite players like Ashton Jeanty and Brock Bowers, man, what does that say about the offense? What does that foretell about this offense? How good can this offense be? And it needs to be good. Let's face it, you guys. It's been a problem now. I mean, there was a period of time with Josh McDaniels where I think it was the first half of the season or so, the Raiders were a top 10 offense, top 12, top 10 offense. And then the wheels kind of fell off. It was when, Derek Carr just kind of started going downhill a little bit. I don't know if it was the system. I don't know if it was the talent around him. But there was that turn, which ultimately led to him getting benched after the Pittsburgh Steelers game for the last two games of the 2022 season, I should say. Ever since then, ever since basically the last 8 games or so of that 22 season, it's been a struggle offensively. It's been bad offensive lines. It's been bad quarterback play. Devontae Adams tried to do what he did, and he put up pretty solid numbers despite it all. But eventually he wanted out, and you fell below 20 points a game. Then it was 18 points a game. Last year it was 14 points a game, which is ridiculous. Obviously there's nowhere to go but up, but we said that last year and it didn't happen. We're going to say that this year for different reasons. I think with Clint Kubiak in charge, I think with Rick Dennison now in control of the offensive line, and we mentioned Tyler Linderbaum, we mentioned Colton Miller coming back, Jackson Powers-Johnson, coming back and fighting for one of those guard spots. There's going to be a stiff competition at right tackle. There's going to be competition at both guard spots, to be honest with you, and there's not. When we think about that competition, I think no longer is the case where you kind of have to, turn up your nose a little bit and say, okay, well, we're going to go with this guy. I liked Alex Kappa. He was a fun guy to cover and visit with, but he just wasn't very good anymore, and that was an issue. Unfortunately, his best days were behind him. And that matters, right? I mean, when you have to go to an Alex Kappa at that stage of his career, this was at one point a really good football player, but when you had to turn to him last year the way they did, he just didn't really have much left in the gas tank. Heck, some of his best games were at center, a position he hadn't even played before. I don't see that being the case this year. I don't see if you. Like the spirit of competition that's going to unfold over at right tackle, I think is going to produce a pretty good starter. But also, you're going to have nice backups. Let's say DJ Glaze is your swing tackle. Let's say Trey Zune wins that job or Charles Grant wins that job. DJ Glaze, a guy who started his first 2 years in the NFL, and I know last year was a little bit of a step back for him. But I put some of that on coaching. If he's your swing tackle, that's not bad at all, right? So, that's something to keep an eye on. And then Caleb Rogers and Spencer Burford and, whether it's Trey Zune or you got Jordan Meredith, guys that are battling for guard spots. Whoever wins the job, I think is going to win the job and be the best man for that job. But also, I think decent depth is going to be created. We're going to go out to the Raider Nation Radio listener line because Mike is in Las Vegas and he wants to talk about this roster. Mike, how are you doing, buddy?
Real good. I think with the new coaching staff and you got 11 free agents plus the players like Austin Jeanty, Brock Bowers, I think with this new administration, this new style, Pete Carroll couldn't really motivate this team to do well. I think with this new regime, offense, defense, and special teams, if the Raiders have any kind of injury-free aspects with their key players, there's no reason why they can't be a wild card team this year, possibly 9 or 10 wins. I feel very confident about what the new coach has done, the new GM, and the additions to the team. So there's no reason, no logical reason why the Raiders can't improve in the 2026 season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there is improvement to be had, and it's not just wishful thinking. They should improve. I mean, they've improved the roster. They've improved, as the coaching staff. But when you're talking about 9 wins, as you foresee that and have that in your vision, who's your quarterback for that 9-win team?
I think Kirk Cousins is going to start the first couple of games, but I think about week 3 or 4, our number 1 draft pick, Mendoza, will be in the fold. Okay,
so you're seeing that with the young quarterback as the starter, which I think is a big thing. If you're telling me that Kirk Cousins can come in here and help you get to 9 wins this year with the new supporting cast and the new coaches, I might be able to buy into that. Now you're saying, but if you're saying it's going to be Fernando Mendoza, that's the best of both worlds right there. The best of both worlds is the Raiders are winning 9 games this year, and that's a massive win total improvement from last year. But the fact that you would be doing it, the bulk of that with your rookie quarterback, tells me that he's the real deal. And so that now you've solved that. You're getting yourself on the winning track. You may be knocking on the door of the playoffs, as you said, at 9 wins, gets you into that neighborhood at least. You're knocking on the door. That would be a fantastic season for the Raiders, without question, if they could win 9 games, and the bulk of those games being Fernando Mendoza as the quarterback. And I'm not ruling it out. And the reason I'm saying that is when you look around the league and you look around at recent history, who's to say that Fernando Mendoza with this coaching staff and the supporting cast now that John Spytek has put together, who's to say that this can't be a Houston, a Texans situation from a couple of years ago when C.J. Stroud and a revamped roster and a really good, solid coaching staff steps in, and all of a sudden the Texans are winning a division or getting to the playoffs. Who says it can't be Jaden Daniels in Washington a couple of years ago when he comes in and is the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, throwing for close to 4,000 yards, running for 800 yards, and that's not Fernando's game, but you get my point. That a rookie quarterback can step in, and all of a sudden, the Washington Commanders go from worst to second to first, second place. They get a wild card, but then they go to the NFC Championship game, win 12 games, go to the NFC Championship game with a rookie quarterback. And let's be honest, the reason they even got Jaden Daniels was because they were the second worst team in the league. They had the second pick overall. So going from the second pick overall to a 12-win team in one calendar year with that rookie quarterback, it shows that it's possible. They did that. The Houston Texans did that. It took the Chicago Bears one more year than it took the Washington Commanders, but in that 1 year with Caleb Williams, who was drafted ahead of Jaden Daniels, they also changed their coach. They brought in a new offensive system. They revamped the offensive line, and all of a sudden they go to the playoffs. They win their division in a tough division, by the way. And the same can be said for the New England Patriots, drafting Drake May, third overall. It was a struggle that first year. They get rid of the coach. They bring in a new coach. They bring in Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. They do some work along the offensive line. And as I'm saying all of this, it kind of reminds me of what the Raiders have done. They just have done it a year earlier than the Chicago Bears and the New England Patriots. So 9 wins. I'm not going to rule it out. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I'm not going to sit here and say there's no chance, because we've seen it over and over again recently in multiple situations where success doesn't have to be years down the line. If you're making the right decisions at the front office, and you're making the right coaching decisions as well. It's the JT the Brick Show. I'm Vinny Bonsignor. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to be joined by Jesse Merrick, and he's going to talk about his thoughts from OTAs yesterday. And again, we want your thoughts at 702-365-9200. What are your expectations in year 2 for Ash and Jeanty with a new offensive line coach, and Clint Kubiak as the coach, and however the quarterback plays out?
In a good way. He's a football robot from heaven. He's a Cadillac out there. We got to get the most out of Brock. Wherever he goes, he's been successful in college and high school, whoever's coached him. Just can't say enough great things about him. Love his work ethic. He is a standard bearer.
Raiders coach Clint Kubiak talking about Brock Bowers, and those are lofty attributes, lofty words from one Clint Kubiak about Brock Bowers, but we agree with it wholeheartedly, and we're welcoming in Jessie Merrick from Silver and Black Sports Network to talk about Brock, to talk about Clint, to talk about Raiders OTAs and his thoughts from OTAs. But let's start right there. First of all, thanks a lot for joining us, Jessie. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, man. Stoked to jump on with you.
So Brock Bowers, I mentioned this earlier in the show at the start. I think we all knew, not a Brock Bowers necessarily, but growing up, there was always that kid in the neighborhood that just could do anything and everything, pick up a golf club, and be able to be a great golfer, a basketball, a baseball, whatever. There was always that dude in our neighborhood that had it all, right? Not sure who that. Maybe it was you. Maybe it was that was you in your neighborhood.
It definitely was not me.
But isn't he? I mean, how we always kind of looked at that dude with like, man, all the luck that you got to be that great of an athlete. But imagine being Brock Bowers and being that amongst the 1% of the population that can play football at this level and being even a cut above that. And it's not even a stretch of the imagination. He's just a freak of nature.
Yeah, no, he really is. Like, the things that he can do in that, like, body size is, like, otherworldly. I was having a conversation recently with Max Toscano of Reception Perception, and he is, like, a tight end expert. And he was just talking about how, Brock Bowers can do some things that slot receivers are able to do because of the way he moves in that body size. Now, he's got some limitations in terms of what's asked of, like, a true X receiver and stuff. But in terms of, like, a power slot, like, this guy can do it all, and it's positions like that totally change the game, and he's so unique of what you can do with throwing him in the backfield and all of those things. Like, it's really impressive to watch, and that's why I think Raiders fans should be even more fired up that they have a coach in Clint Kubiak who comes from a system where, like, you have very clear examples of how tight ends and just, like, guys of this body size and body style are used in so many different ways, and so, like, there's just going to be a ton of crazy looks that we're going to see out of Brock Bowers, and I am very excited to see how Clint Kubiak schemes him up, just as a fan of football and scheme and things like that.
Yeah, and it sounded like, when Clint said that, he was kind of putting the onus on himself. Like, he laid it out. This is what I'm working with right now. He's a freak of nature, a football robot from the. Now it's my job to make sure I get the most out of this. How do you think he does go about that?
I think look, so you go back and you look at the offense that he had in Seattle with, Jackson Smith and Jigba being their guy that they funneled the ball to. Now, Brock Bowers is going to be that funnel. He's not going to take on the JSN role just because there are some things that he can't do in that regard. That's no knock on him. It's just he's a different type of player, but he's going to be able to do so much in terms of being a mover. Like, it's almost going to probably be like a Where's Waldo game with Brock Bowers, with moving him around and moving the pieces around him. I mean, we know that Clint Kubiak loves motions. I did it at 60% of the time last season. So there's just going to be so much for the defense to take into account to where, like, you almost muddy the waters with all that movement, and then you lose track of Brock Bowers, and we're all sitting up there like, how the heck is Brock Bowers that wide open? Well, it's because Kubiak messed up the look for the defense and schemed a guy like that open. And, it's going to be like ripple effects that go through it. And I think that's one of the things, too, that stands out to me. So many of us talked about it, and I was one of the guys that said, oh, you need a true X receiver coming out of the draft. They don't go that route. And I understand why now in hindsight with talking to more and more people, because it's like, hey, look, you got to figure out what you're going to do. Like, if you're going to run this offense through Brock Bowers and make him your funnel, don't go and then add a receiver and try and figure out how to, like, piece it all together. Like, that's something that I think comes next year, and that's like a luxury pick for where the Raiders are at right now. But they are going all in on Brock Bowers, like, as that funnel, as the centerpiece of the offense. And then they have a ton of the complementary pieces around him that can, also, take up targets when defenses are trying to track him down and paying a ton of attention to him. So I think the fact that they don't go and get another receiver and the fact of what Brock's going to be doing bodes really well for Jalen Naylor, Trey Tucker, Jack Besh, and the rest of the receivers in there that can work as complementary pieces that honestly probably aren't going to have, like, insane years in terms of the stats jumping off the page, but we'll look back and be like, they were able to spread the ball around really well to each of these guys because what Brock Bowers provides. But he is going to be the guy that should be getting, 120, 140 plus, looks throughout the year.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're talking to Jesse Merrick from Silver and Black Sports Network. Another freak of nature to me is the running back Ashton Jeanty. And, kind of miraculous what he did last year, 900-plus yards, despite no help whatsoever. We won't get into all that. But it was interesting yesterday, when Clint was asked about taking the pressure off of Ashton, and he actually went the opposite. He said, I'm putting more pressure on him. Need to get more out of him. That's another player that he's got to, maximize. And I think that's music to Ashton's ears. He literally said, I don't want to come off the field. He said that, essentially said that yesterday. If I don't have to be off the field, I don't want to be off the field. So I think they're aligned in that respect. What do you feel is the happy point for that? I think 75% of the time he needs to be out there. That's just me. But what do you say?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good starting point for sure. I mean, again, when you go look at Christian McCaffrey, and even Clint said it too, and I haven't had a chance to look up his usage rate in terms of how much percentage of the snaps he's out there, but I would imagine it's probably in that 80 to 90%. I think that is where Ashton needs to live. And the reason I say in that category is because that's not just as a pure running back. I say it all the time. We can't forget what Ashton Jeanty did as a receiver in college. His junior year in particular led all of running backs in the FBS in receiving yards. So this is a guy that has that part of his game that can be unlocked. Last year he actually had, I thought, a solid receiving, outing in terms of touchdowns. I mean, brings in 5 touchdowns as a receiver, 55 catches off of 73 targets, and goes for about 350 yards receiving. Not bad given how bad things were in that offense, surrounding him. So I think we're going to see plenty of times where we will see both of those backs out there, but Ashton Jeanty very likely split out as a receiver, taking advantage of those opportunities. Another thing that's really seared in my brain, and I said it on our show yesterday, was, I believe it was the game against the Rams when Kubiak motioned Jackson Smith and Jigma into the backfield, and then he ran a corner route. I believe they scored a touchdown on it. I think it was in the playoffs. And I was like, well, shoot, you don't have to motion him from out wide into the backfield. You can have him run those types of routes there. So I just think we're going to see his route tree expand so much in the way that he's used in that area of his game. And that, to me, again, screams if I'm a fantasy football owner or whatever, I'm drafting this guy because the usage is going to be off the charts because, as you said, as you started talking about this subject, Clint Kubiak leaned into making sure Ashton's out on the ball more and wants to feed him more, all those things, rather than last year we were hearing coaches say, well, we want to temper it, we want him on a pitch count, all those different things. He's telling you exactly what they want to do. And I think it was Marcus Johnson that said it on Twitter that he's telling you he wants to be 1,000 rusher, 1,000 receiving yardage back if you read between the lines of what Kubiak's saying.
Christian McCaffrey played 932 offensive snaps last year. That was 82.9% of the offensive snaps, which I think is a good world to be in. Here's the thing about that, Jesse, and we're talking to Jesse Merrick. Of those plays, he carried the ball 311 times for 1,202 yards. He also had 129 targets. So talk about using him when he's on the football field. He also had 129 targets for 102 catches for 924 yards and 7 touchdowns. Also scored 10 touchdowns on the ground. So 17 total touchdowns. That's a lot of use. That to me, that's putting him to good use at 82% of the 83% of the snaps. Let's call it 83% of the snaps. So do you think, if you're Clint Kubiak, is that kind of where you're headed with this?
I would imagine so. And as you're reading those things off, I'm thinking about think about the team that he's on and he's doing that in, that kind of usage with the other weapons that they have, on that squad. And again, in the similar style offense. So yeah, I'd be right in that range, that 82% mark and the number of targets. I mean, look at where the Raiders are and wanting to build for the future and all those things. Yes, they do need to figure out what they have in the receiving core, but offensively, lean into your young elite talent level players in Brock Bowers and Ashton Jeanty. They should be your attack on the ground, through the air, you name it. It should be them probably 75% of the time, and then everybody else getting in where they fit in terms of the target share and things like that. So yeah, I think they both need to be in that well over 100% or 100 plus target range and even receptions, obviously for Brock especially, but even for Ashton. So, yeah, I would agree that's where it needs to go because he has the versatility. Like, you drafted him 6th overall. I understand it was a different staff, but same front office. Like, you brought him here to have that kind of workload. He has that in his game. You have to maximize that. And, again, like, use all the other pieces as your complementary pieces around them to take advantage when teams are paying so much attention to those guys in particular.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you drafted him and Brock for that exact reason. That's why you invested a high draft pick in a tight end and a running back to use them. So I'm right there with you. Talking to Jesse Merrick from Silver and Black Sports Network. All right, so for all of that to happen, what does also need to happen, first and foremost, is the offensive line needs to get squared away. That goes without saying. None of that with Ashton Jeanty happens. None of that with Brock Bowers happens unless the offensive line gets fixed. And we saw some interesting things yesterday. You know, Trey Zune got a lot of snaps at right tackle. He was drafted as a center, but then listed as a guard, and now he got a bunch of snaps at right tackle. We also saw Spencer Buford, who was signed in free agency, lining up with the number ones at left guard. I was talking to some people in the building. There is a real expectation that could be the case to start the season. Spencer Buford is 25 years old. He has a history with Clint Kubiak, and he's a long history with this particular offense. All right, so you were there. You got a chance to see some of that offensive line. What were your initial thoughts about where everyone was lining up?
Yeah. I mean, look, and you know this, and I just need to make sure I say this. It's hard to get a read on the offensive line or defensive lines without pads and stuff like that. But having said that, Burford stood out to me in terms of the way he moves. At one point, I even remember, because we're at the stage right now, too, where we're just now seeing the team out there with our own eyes and getting used to, like, who's in what numbers and everything. And on one of the running plays, I was like, I forget what number he is off the top of my head, but I remember thinking, like, whoa, wait, who was that guy? He was moving for a big dude. And I look him up, I was like, oh, that's the new offensive lineman, Burford, they signed. So, he caught my eye just in terms of the way that he's moving, which we all know is massive in this scheme, and that was something, his movement skills stood out to me more. Like, I understand who Tyler Linderbaum is and all this stuff, and I hope no one takes this the wrong way. Burford caught my eye because of that movement more than any other offensive lineman in that particular, moment and stretch of plays there where I tried to watch it. So I was like, okay, the athleticism jumps off the page to me. And I don't think it should be a massive shock that he's slotted in right now, if let's say May 21st as a quote-unquote starter, if you will, because he's got familiarity in this offense with this staff, all those different things. And outside of that, it's young guys and Caleb Rogers that needs to prove, who he is to this staff, and which direction he's moving in. So that's one of the things where I was like, yeah, I kind of expected that to be the case. And with Trey Zune, I think it's good that he's working with your quote-unquote threes, which is really just another word for saying all the rookies right now because they're lumping many of the rookies together. And he's learning every position. And Kubiak, the thing that stood out to me is he said, we think he's got the mind for it. And that is saying a lot. Because it's a lot. Even Colton Miller said it. A lot for a kid to come in and learn one position, let alone three different ones, at different spots. So he just needs to be listed as O-lineman, not any particular positional tag. So it's going to be really interesting to watch the way he develops and where he kind of slots in. I would imagine just now sitting here May 21st, he probably ends up being your backup, swing, guard, center, tackle, you name it, can do everything in the second grouping by the time the season gets rolling. But I wonder what the development looks like for him. If there's a way he can kind of carve out a role as a starter, likely at that left guard spot. I mean, there's going to be a lot of guys competing for it there. Like we noted, Burford, Zune, and probably Caleb Rogers going to have a little something to say about who ends up being the guy at left guard.
One last thing about Burford. He's 1 year older than Caleb Rogers. He's a young player, and I keep remembering that. He's only 25 years old. He's had vast amounts of starting experience, and you mentioned the athletic ability, which he's known for. But also, can I throw this out there and get your thoughts? He's now playing in between Colton Miller and Tyler Linderbaum. Whatever, because I know you've probably gotten this too. I mentioned Spencer on social media. He can't block. He can't do this. He's terrible. Yeah. He's not a good, So you've gotten that feedback as well. But I keep reminding people he's only 25 years old. He's got a lot of experience, and now he's in a really good situation playing alongside those guys. Is there a reason to think that, or not think that, his best football could still very much be ahead of him?
Yeah, no, because again, like the simple fact of like you noted, you said he's only a year younger than Caleb or older.
A year older than Caleb. Yeah.
Yeah, a year older than Caleb, having that many years under his belt, having played in the league at 22, in a position that is a very much so developmental position, like still room to grow and learn, and he's still figuring out probably who he is in the league, And so you go and surround him with those guys that you noted in Miller and Linderbaum, like. Name a better situation to be in. You'd probably be hard-pressed for a lot of offensive linemen, young offensive linemen, to slot into. And again, on an offensive line that's coached by Rick Dennison, who has a master's degree in this scheme, in this family Kubiak scheme, that it is. And also is coached by Clint Kubiak as a whole, who grew up in this scheme. Whereas last year, they're running some of those zone looks and things like that and trying to implement something similar to this. But it's guys that don't have that deep, wealth of experience in it. Now you have a staff that has that to be able to teach and get more out of these young offensive linemen. That's where I think a guy like a Burford can take that next jump. A guy like a DJ Glaze can take that next jump. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think fans need to kind of pump the brakes anytime they sit there and say what a guy was. See what it looks like with the pieces surrounding them, not only the coaches, but the players that they're playing with. I think that's a big one. Because, too, along the offensive line, so much of it is communication and being on the same page and all that stuff, especially in this scheme. And who better to have around you than guys like Colton Miller and Linderbaum for you to be able to flourish. And so I think he's in a really good position, him or whoever ends up locking down that left guard spot.
We're talking to Jessie Merrick from Silver and Black Sports Network. All right, on the other side of the football, somebody that has caught my eye is Jermod McCoy. And he just looks different. There's dudes we talk about the Brock Bowers and the Ashton Jeantys offensively. I think McCoy, if you take the knee out of the situation, which we can't overlook that, but he is that caliber of player. That's who he was in college before this unfortunate injury that he suffered. He was a difference maker, and the Raiders might have gotten a difference maker, in the fourth round. But you got your eyes on him. He was able to be out there at practice yesterday. Your thoughts on the possibility and what your initial thoughts are of this young cornerback from Tennessee?
Yeah. So, and this kind of leads into what you were saying about where guys just looking different. Anybody that's been around athletes knows this, and all these guys that play are athletes. But you can just tell how springy guys are in the way they walk. That's one of those things that stands out a lot of times. And you watch him, and you're just yeah, I can tell he's a freak of nature athlete. And as I'm watching him, I'm sitting there trying to see okay, where does he look hampered by this knee? Because it is such a big deal in storyline. And, yes, they're keeping him on a pitch count and kind of limiting what he's doing and everything like that. But, if you had no idea that he had this, knee problem, you wouldn't notice it out there on the field. So, I don't say that to say, oh, he's ready to go now. Temper expectations, see what it looks like over the course of a really big workload. But, he does look like a dude where you watch him and you're okay, I can see the movement skills. You can see the fluidity and just, how easy it is for him, to reach that top gear. So I'm interested to see if and when we get a chance to look at this kid in, one-on-one type situations. And I think the rest of the guys in that room are too. Even Eric Stokes, when he was asked about Jermod McCoy, he said you could tell he kind of stumbled around a little because he doesn't really know how to address the knee and everything, but said, I'm excited to see what he can do. He sees the potential that's there, and I think that's how I kind of wrap my head around it as well. So you can see it in a little bit. The fact, too, that, anytime anybody is a punt returner, you're okay, they're one of those type of athletes. Punt returning, you need to be a different type of dude to do it. So he's a guy that I think once we start to really get a look on him and he gets those snaps under his belt to see what he can take in terms of the knee, I think is going to be a guy that'll take off. And Kubiak and them like him too. I mean, you heard him up at the press conference yesterday saying that he looks like the guy they saw on film. So if it transpires to be that, this is not a sensational statement to make. If he is that guy that they think he is, that's going to completely transform that cornerback room for the Raiders and all of a sudden turn what looked like a weakness with kind of a lack of depth into wow, okay, they have a really solid room built for the future.
One more thing on McCoy, and I think it's worth mentioning. It feels like everyone's bracing and, oh my gosh, expecting the worst in the knee right now. It's not that situation. This is more of a Todd Gurley, and I've talked to a couple of general managers around the league who shared what their intel was on him. And by the way, he was not lasting very much longer in the fourth round. People were ready to pounce. They took the red flag off of him by that point in the draft across the league. So the Raiders did a good job of beating everybody to the punch. And the way it's been explained to me is it's not a right now issue. It's a potentially long-range issue, the longevity of it. And Todd Gurley was a name that was brought up. He had suffered that devastating knee injury at Georgia, recovered from it, was fantastic for a period of time in the NFL, but then the longevity issue, came into play. So it's funny when we not funny, but when people are looking for all these signs about the knee, is it good? Is he good to go? It's not that. It's the longevity issue. And hearing Clint talk yesterday about the plan that they have in place, and Alex Guerrero, again, when you start talking about the training people and the experts now in this Raiders building, you got to feel pretty good about where this might be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good way to frame it. And I think all of us, myself included, are caught in sometimes prisoner of the moment of like, well, what about the long-term thing and all of that? Like, or the now and all that. Like, I'll admit that. But with him, yeah, I think let's just say if you can get 4 really good years out of him, then that pick was worth it. Obviously, all of us are rooting for the kid, want him to have a very long career because nobody wants anybody to have a short career like that. But if he's as advertised for 3-4 years, again, going to be totally transformational for this team. But to your point about Alex Guerrero and that group, the one thing the Raiders were really good at last year was staying healthy. I believe they lost the least amount of games to injury of any team in the league, if I remember right. I think I remember reading that. So, they very clearly have it figured out. Guerrero obviously working with Brady, who is a different breed and everything like that, but and obviously different position too, and what toll that takes on the body in terms of cutting and things like that. But that played as long as he did and all those things. So the fact that they've got the plan, they've got him in the building, and staff that Eric Stokes even talked about, training staff-wise and stuff, and the relationships he had with them and the way that they treat him and the rest of the guys on this team and being a big part of why he wants to be here. Fans do have to feel pretty good about those are being the people that are working with McCoy and making sure the plan is right moving forward, So, like I said, I'm real interested to see, what kind of conversation we're having about Jermod McCoy, 2, 3, 4 years from now and what that looks like. But in the immediate of it, again, if he's the guy that everybody saw in 2024 in college, the Raiders got themselves a top 10 talent at that stage of the game. And to your point, too, there's a reason they traded up to get him. They know what the rest of the teams around the league were thinking, and they didn't want to leave that to chance. And I thought it was a really smart move. Very, very low risk and ridiculously high reward move.
Well, when it comes to career longevity, there's no concerns about Jesse Merrick. He's going to have a good long career. He's already had a great career and will continue to have a great career. Jesse Merrick, thank you so much for joining us. Truly appreciate the insight on all things Raiders. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you down the line. Awesome. Thanks, Vin. Appreciate you, man. You got it, brother. That's Jesse Merrick from Silver and Black Sports Network, shedding a lot of light on what he was able to see yesterday. And it bears repeating with Jermod McCoy. He's good to go right now. I mean, I don't know if he could go out there and play on a Sunday, but I wouldn't doubt that he could, actually. It's more preserving him and getting him through and managing him. And so knock on wood that's going to happen. It's the JT The Brick Show. I'm Vinny Bonsignor. We want your thoughts. 702-365-9200. Headed into hour number 2. I'm Vinny Bonsignor sitting in for JT The Brick. We want your thoughts. 702-365-9200. What are your expectations for Ashton Jeanty? Because sure sounds like Clint Kubiak has some expectations for his young running back and is putting it on himself to get the most out of Ashton Jeanty. And I think that's good news and music to Ashton Jeanty's ears. Out to the listener line because Snake Man is in the Carolinas somewhere around, slithering around the Carolinas. Snake Man, how you doing, my brother?
Hey, what's going on, dude? Hey, Jeanty, for me, he's going to crush it this year. I don't see any way he doesn't, just based on all that dysfunction and stuff that happened last year. I alluded to that, weeks ago. But I thought he was really going to rock and roll this year or so. But I want to go back to the offensive line because you guys were at the OTAs, right? Or at least the first day. Is that correct?
Yeah, yesterday was OTAs, correct.
So, I've been it's not my soapbox, but the reason why I compared Zune to Spencer Fana, who was taken by, I think, Cleveland in the first round, is because, like I said before, a few weeks ago, they were identically the same as far as measurables, et cetera. That's why I felt that Zune had a chance to really, seize that right tackle spot. But I guess I'm going to ask you, Vinny and Clay, if you guys were there, did Zoom look any different to you than, say, DJ Glaze, just playing movement-wise out there? Could you discern anything at all, just right from a quick, glance of him, or no, as far as his feet and all? I know his hands were great, and his pass pro is just fantastic, which is why I think he is going to seize that right tackle spot. But what do you think of his movement and all that?
I was at the NFL owners meeting, so I wasn't physically there. But everyone that I've talked to, there's no, they're different football players. They're different athletes. So I'm sure there's going to be some subtle differences in their movement. DJ Glaze did, if you're calling it the starting five, that first came out as that group. DJ Glaze was the starter at right tackle. It's his job, or has been his job, I should say, for the last 2 years. And this is a guy that had a good year his first year. Last year, nobody had a good year. Let's be honest about that. It was just there was a lot of dysfunction along the offensive line. And let's face it, if you're DJ Glaze, I've mentioned this before, Snake Man. How about, he's not going to ever say this, but I'll say it for him. How about settling down and having one coach for the poor kid? The first 2 years of his career, he had 3 offensive line coaches. So this is his 4th offensive line coach when you think about who was here when he started his rookie year, right? Then they changed midway through the season, and it's a different offensive line coach. Then they bring in Brendan Carroll last year. That's 3 in his first year and a half, and now a fourth coach for him along the offensive line in year 3. So you got to imagine that. I mean, I know we want to put all the blame on DJ Glaze for not having a great year last year, or not building off of what he built on the year before, but let's give him a little bit of grace. His head's got to be spinning at this point. So hopefully Rick Dennison's the guy for a good long time, or however long he wants to do this. And some of these young offensive linemen who have had multiple offensive line coaches, this is the 4th offensive line coach. Think about that for a second. That's not ideal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's not ideal. So I would say this. I think that the Raiders have done a really good job of infusing the offensive line with young talent. I'll throw in Burford in there. He's still only 25 years old. And I think they have the right people now in place in terms of the coaches, the system, the scheme, the coaching ability to get the most out of these players. So I'm not going to rule out anybody at any position that's up for competition right now. Because I think the talent is there. Now it's just who is the best player going to be, and I'll get your thoughts on this, Snake Man. And it's not going to be a situation where, well, we got to start this guy because the other guys aren't good. I think this is going to be a situation where good players are going to win starting jobs over other good players. And so, therefore, now the entire room has been strengthened from the top right on down to the bottom, whatever you want to call the bottom.
Yeah, I'm tracking you too about DJ Glaze. I thought he was drafted because the Raiders, when Telesco in 23 drafted him, they were desperate for a right tackle, and there was a run that went down on those right tackles in that draft, if you recall, and that was kind of like he was like the last guy there that was kind of in the mix, in my opinion, and that Telesco drafted him because they just had a need for him. But he's long, he's strong as an ox, his feet aren't that great. So that's why I just thought maybe initially that Zune might be the guy because of his foot speed. But other than that, DJ Glaze, I mean, he's young. I mean, he played 700 snaps, I think, on average, 3 years straight at Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure he played 3 full years and did not miss a game. So the guy, and he didn't miss a game for the Raiders since they bought him one either, right? If I'm not mistaken. So he's durable. So I'm really stoked about the offensive line. I agree. I as far as their their size, and I want to get back to this real quick. Remind me to mention one thing about Caleb Rogers, but their size and their youth and their athleticism. I mean, like I said before in previous call, some of those guys had great combines. They had high RAS scores. So, as far as that goes, I think we're tracking really, really well with the offensive line. But I was curious, too. One last thing. You said, I think it was yesterday or day before, and he's confounding mountains up here. I'm in and out of service all the time. But you said that Caleb Rogers looked huge. He looked bigger. Now, when him and Charles Grant were selected back-to-back, I believe, in that draft last year. They were about the same size. Did they look different to you now? Does Caleb Rogers look much bigger than Charles Grant to you?
He's just a bigger dude than Charles, height wise and all that kind of stuff. But Charles looks like he put the work in. Let's put it that way. So it's not like where he's lapping him in terms of the size. He's just Caleb is bigger looking than last year in a good way, as is Charles Grant, and both of those players were tracking in that direction during the year. I always like to watch that. I talk to guys about that because you get to the NFL from college, and now it's not a part-time job. It's right? In college, you still have to go to school. You only get a certain amount of time in the building, the way things work, the way rules work, and you're not 24/7 doing your job. It's not your profession at that stage of your life, but it is when you get to the NFL. And then on top of that, you have nutritionists, you have experts at their field in terms of the weight room work, the eating habits, the practice, all of that. So if you're putting the work in and listening and heeding the advice, and also this is really important, making sure that it doesn't just stay in the building. Like you take those new habits and those new that new eating regime and that sleep and rest regime off the field, back at your apartment, back at your house, and don't deviate in that regard. You're gonna see differences in your body. The guys that don't heed it all 24/7, basically, you're not going to see what you need to see. But in Charles's case, throughout the course of the last year, and I know I talked to him about this, and in Caleb's case, they were moving in the right direction, and you saw the differences in their body as the season went on. So that has continued in the off season in a really good way.
The very definition of professional. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate the call, man. Thank you so much, and great thoughts along the offensive line. And I'm with you. I mean, the Raiders. I would not call DJ Glaze a desperation pick whatsoever. I've talked to Tom Telesco about that pick, and they knew that he was a little bit of a project coming in. But I'll never forget the day where he let everybody know that he was closer to being a starter than maybe not. It was literally the first day of pads in Costa Mesa, and the starter goes down, literally the first or second rep, and all of a sudden DJ Glaze has to put his helmet on and go in there and had to face Max Crosby. And I'm not saying that he got the best of Max Crosby whatsoever, but he held his own. There were times where, because everybody on the sideline, including Tom Telesco, he told me, I'm holding my breath. This could get really ugly, because we've all seen Max Crosby just destroy people in practice in those settings, and it was actually pretty competitive. Max definitely got his without question, but there were moments where DJ, in a moment of truth, held his own. And I remember talking to Tom Telesco about that, and he was like, I'm over there holding my breath. And then all of a sudden I'm going, oh, boy. We may have something here a lot sooner than we initially thought. And then he ended up becoming the starter at right tackle and had a good, solid rookie year despite the dysfunction there. Remember, they fired their offensive line coach and offensive coordinator midway through that season, much like they ended up doing, at least with the offensive coordinator. They probably should have fired the offensive line coach too last year, but it was the head coach's son, so that wasn't going to happen. But there was dysfunction with the offensive staff in 2024. There was dysfunction with the offensive staff in 2025, and you got a bunch of young players who deserve better, quite frankly. It's nobody's fault. It is what it is, and it happened. But these are young players who, you're drafting for development purposes, and hopefully, whether it's sooner or later, they're going to be really good football players. But you're doing them a disservice with all that dysfunction. So now, hopefully, again, with Rick Dennison and Clint Kubiak and the offensive coordinator. Look, Andrew Janocko, the offensive coordinator, if the Raiders are able to light the world on fire offensively, he's out of here. He's going to get a head coaching job at some point. And that's a good thing. You want to get to a point where you're not firing coordinators. You're saying, congratulations, you're going on to be a head coach. That's the ideal world. So there will be coaching overturn if the Raiders do really well. And again, that's a great thing. Great organizations send coaches elsewhere for promotions, to be head coaches. That's what you want to get to. But when it comes to maybe your offensive line coach, hopefully there's some stability there for a little while. And obviously this is always going to be, as long as Clint Kubiak is here, it's going to be his offense. So if he has to hire a new offensive coordinator because Andrew Nodoko did so well that he's the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns or whoever it might be, it's still going to be Clint Kubiak's offense. He'll go out and get a coordinator that thinks like him and understands what he's trying to do. But from that top spot down to the offensive assistants, what you want to have that you have not had, you just have not had it, and it's been multiple years, multiple regimes of different voices, different coaches, different people in charge, different schemes, different ways of doing it. Sometimes not even from one year to the next, within the darn season, there's been that. So Josh McDaniels, I think, didn't they? No, I don't think they fired their. Well, he got fired. Yes, he gets fired. So there was a new offensive coordinator when he got fired in 2023. So 2023, 2024, 2025, literally in the middle of seasons, they had to change. They changed coaches, offensive coordinators, and in some cases, offensive line coaches. And you got a bunch of young players who are like, again, we're doing this again. So they need stability too. And so when we talk about this offensive line and we talk about, some of the players and how they've performed or not performed over the last few years, never forget kind of what they've been through too. And they've been through the ringer in a lot of ways. Go look at the successful teams. You say to yourself, wow, man, the Rams, they always are able to find people, or the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, they always have they've had continuity in a lot of cases with their offensive staffs or defensive staffs on the other side of the football, so that the guys that you draft are getting a consistent message. And so what you're teaching them to do from day one is what you're teaching them to do in day 3 and year 2 and year 3, and that's how you develop players ideally. Of course, it's going to happen where coaches get fired, but you can't be doing it every single year or every other year. And the Raiders are on a little bit of a run here, let's face it, of every single year, and not just, as I said, from one season to the next, literally inside the seasons. There's been major firings of coordinators and position coaches and sometimes head coaches, and it leaves a bunch of players heads spinning. So hopefully we're at a point now with the Raiders where there is real continuity, and that's going to benefit everybody, including some of these young players that they've drafted. So we'll see whether it's going to be Trey Zune, whether it's going to be DJ Glaze, whether it's going to be Charles Grant. We'll see what happens at guard. Right now, it feels like Spencer Burford has a little bit of an inside track based on his experience. That's a guy who has started a lot of games in the NFL in his young career on some high-level teams. That can't be ignored as well. He wasn't, the starting guard, on a 3-14 team. He was a starting guard on a Super Bowl team, a team that went to multiple playoffs, multiple division winners. Like the highest of expectations. And so, when you think about, and we're going to have Kirk Morrison come on. And he's going to talk about, Spencer, and he's going to talk about the 49ers and how they're a team that typically they don't necessarily re-sign their offensive linemen. Think about the last, big investments they've made in terms of re-signing offensive linemen. What they usually do, outside of Trent Williams, right? They've extended him a couple of times. He's one of the best in the business, but McClinchy is a clear example. Their right tackle signs a big deal with the Denver Broncos. It's worked out for McClinchy. It's worked out for the Denver Broncos, obviously. But the Niners have not had an opportunity. I'm sure ideally that's where he would have wanted to stay. But they don't normally do that. What they do is they draft and replace. They draft, develop, and then they feel like, okay, we're good. We've drafted somebody behind you. We're ready to go and replace you. And that's kind of what they did with Spencer Burford. So we're going to get Kirk's thoughts about that at the bottom of the hour. But we want to talk to you as well. 702-365-9200. Talk about continuity, talk about different visions, talk about being able to provide these young players with a singular voice. We're talking about Ashton Jeanty and the year that he had. It wasn't the year that everyone expected, obviously, but again, we go right back to the coaching staff. It just wasn't working. You fire Chip Kelly midway through the season or whenever it was. You bring in a new offensive coordinator, and then all of a sudden everything changes. All the messaging changes, and whether it was subtle or dramatic change, it was a change, and they had to do things differently. And it was a new leader in place, and now there's another new voice. But again, the hope is that this is the voice, and these are the voices that are here for a good long time. And if that is the case, guys like Ashton Jeanty, guys like Brock Bowers, guys like DJ Glaze and Jackson Powers Johnson, they're just going to be better off for it. That's not obviously, I'm not saying anything that nobody doesn't understand. It's just not sustainable at this level of football, where the changeover in rosters and the need to be able to draft and develop. Drafting and develop is the lifeline of a football team. You don't buy your way to championships. You buy additions to already really good football teams that you drafted and developed. That's how it works. You draft good, you develop well, and then you go out and sprinkle some free agent signings, or maybe a trade here or there to be able to kind of accentuate what you already have in place, what you've already drafted and developed. You can't do that. You just can't do that by continually pulling the rug under guys' feet. And it's super important as far as I'm concerned. And I think the Raiders, they were going to end up with Fernando Mendoza, whether they kept Pete Carroll or didn't, right? But I think they did, obviously, the wise thing in just saying, look, this isn't working. We don't see the longevity here, not just because it wasn't working, but because of where Pete Carroll was at this stage of his life. There just wasn't longevity. So if you brought in a Fernando Mendoza and paired him up with the Pete Carroll, it was only a matter of time before you had to be looking for Pete Carroll's replacement, right? So in this case, they said, look, we're getting ready to invest in this young quarterback. It's obviously not working anyway, but here's one more reason why we should just make the change right now and go pair this young quarterback up with somebody that we feel is a difference maker as a head coach and as an offensive mind. And that's why they did what they did, and that's why they targeted Clint Kubiak. Not to say that there weren't other really strong candidates, but Clint Kubiak, we can all agree, was the hot name when it came to offensive-minded head coach possibilities. And you look what's happened in Jacksonville with Liam Cohen going over there and getting that thing sorted out. Jacksonville Jaguars, are in the playoffs, right? With Trevor Lawrence. He finally got, you talk about a guy that's had multiple voices in his ears over the years, and we always want to blame the quarterback. Why hasn't Trevor Lawrence been the quarterback that he's supposed to be? How many head coaches and offensive coordinators can you expect a guy to have? And don't, you can sit here and say, well, Trevor Lawrence not playing as well as advertised led to some of those firings. Okay, we can have that argument. But was Urban Meyer the right hire? That was just a bad hire. There were bad hires, too. There were bad hires as the head coach. There were bad hires as the offensive coordinator. And that did all those mistakes, all that turnover is bound to hold a guy like Trevor Lawrence back. And now all of a sudden he's got a consistent voice in Liam Cohen. I don't think Liam's going anywhere anytime soon. He found his his job that he was okay leaving a nice job in Tampa Bay for. And it worked. And all of a sudden now we're seeing a better Trevor Lawrence. And I expect that to continue. So the Raiders sized up the situation and said enough is enough. Let's go find the perfect pairing with our young quarterback and our young head coach. And you could throw an Ashton Jeanty in there, and you could throw a Brock Bowers in there because they're young players as well. And hearing Clint Kubiak talk yesterday about the fact that that's what he's here for. Let's be honest. He's here to fix the offense. He's here to fix the offensive line along with Rick Dennison. He's here to maximize Fernando Mendoza. That goes without saying. And if so, that'll go a long way toward fixing this offense. He's here to maximize Brock Bowers, to get more out of Brock Bowers, who he basically certified as there's nothing at all wrong with Brock Bowers. There's nothing I'm going to be able to necessarily teach him. He's got everything that you need to be maybe the best tight end that ever played the game. And that's not even a stretch to say that. Like, at the very least, among the best tight ends to ever play that position. He's got that caliber of that sort of ability. So it has nothing literally to do with Brock Bowers. He's got the work ethic, he's got the mindset, he's got the skills, he's got the speed, he's got the size, he's got the passion, he's got all of that stuff. You know what it's a matter of now? Making sure that you're getting the most out of your quarterback and making sure you're putting Brock Bowers in position to maximize all of that tremendous heaven-sent skills that he has. And I know Clint Kubiak is capable of that and up to that challenge. For me, it's how high can he take it? Because Brock Bowers is that caliber player, and you might as well throw Ashton Jeanty in that as well. And we've been talking about that throughout the show. What are your expectations? 702-365-9200. Because if you're gonna fix the offense, and you're fixing that offensive line, and you're making sure that the quarterback is playing at a high level, that's only going to benefit an Ashton Jeanty, and that goes hand in hand because he doing what he's capable of doing in the run game and in the pass game is going to make Fernando Mendoza better, or Kirk Cousins if he's the starter to start the season. He's going to make Brock Bowers better. He's going to make the rest of the wide receivers or receiving targets better because there's going to be a lot of focus on Ashton Jeanty, and it's going to go hand in hand. And that's what Clint Kubiak is here to do, and he knows that. That's exactly what he said. It's the Morning Tailgate Show. That's my show earlier in the day. It's the JT the Brick Show. I'm Vinny Bonsignor. We want your thoughts. 702-365-9200. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, the great Kirk Morrison is going to join us here on a Thursday.
Welcome back to the JT the Brick Show, brought to you by The Black Hole. Become a member of football's most notorious fans.
Yeah, he's been excellent. He's come in here and worked his tail off, doing everything that we've asked him to do. He's got out there on the practice field and has shown the player that we've seen on tape. So just looking forward to progressing him along with all those new DBs. It's an impressive group, really well-coached group by Joe and Matt and Robbie. Very competitive young men right now in that defensive back room.
That's Clint Kubiak talking about Jermod McCoy, who, boy, I tell you what, just looking at him yesterday, he is a special specimen. That dude's a stud, is what football scouts like to say from time to time, and has a chance to be a real impact player. Just knock on wood that the knee holds up, because if it does, there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to be a really good football player for the Raiders. And to talk about that and many other things Raider related, we go out to our guest line and welcome in Kirk Morrison, a great football mind. He's part of the Raiders broadcast team, and we always enjoy his thoughts and having him on the show. Kirk, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you're having a great day, my friend.
Vinny, what's up, my man? You already know I'm here, the voice of reason. What's going on?
That's right, the voice of reason, and sometimes we need that. But let's start real quick there with McCoy. You played football a long time, and you've seen injuries, and this has kind of been described to me, as I was mentioning earlier, kind of like a Todd Gurley situation, where it's not the right now necessarily. It's kind of the longevity, and sometimes it is what it is, but as I sit here today, and he could go out there and play, and he could get at least 5 good years, and hopefully well beyond that. The Raiders have a special type of football player on their hands for however long that might be.
Yeah, I've said this many times, Vinny, and I'm very biased. I played with Nnamdi Asomugha, one of the great corners that I had a chance to literally play with. It was my teammate. And I saw it year after year with him, and I was the best in the league I had ever seen, as a teammate. And so I always try to tell Raider Nation, basically you're hoping that you drafted Nnamdi Asomugha at the price that you drafted Nate Hobbs and Amik Robertson.
Right.
You know what I mean? Think about it. We knew when the Raiders drafted Amik Robertson and Nate Hobbs at the times, right, that if you got 4 to 5 years of service, that's what you get out of a 4th-round pick or later, right? Mm-hmm. And if you get more than that, then you've excelled. You've exceeded the expectation for what you drafted that player at. Okay? that's what the hope is with Jermon McCoy. I think people feel this first round buzz so much, Vinny, and they're like, oh, my God, you're taking a flyer on a guy who should be playing 8 to 10 years. I'm like, no, he was drafted at a spot where you're generally getting 4 to 5 years of service on that team before that player goes and hits free agency. And that's what I've seen a couple of corners do who have been drafted by the Raiders. Think about Jacorian Bennett. You can name all these guys. If you get that type of production out of these guys for 4 to 5 years, the job is done. I'm not putting a gold jacket on Jermon McCoy, but if he gives me that ability for 4 to 5 years and he hits free agency, isn't that what normally happens in the NFL? To be real?
Yeah, without question, and all the better if it's for high-level years. And he's got that's the thing. He's got the capability of doing that. The reason he was there was because there were some concerns with the knee, but he looks like a special football player. We'll knock on wood for him. We were talking a little bit, exchanging some texts a little bit, and you brought up a really good point. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it had to do with Spencer Burford and the Raiders signing him. And I know there's a little bit of resistance out there from Raider Nation who look at things like PFF and some of the grades and things like that, and are scratching your head wondering why the Raiders might be looking at him as a starting option. Well, Kirk, first of all, he comes from a program that's very similar, an offensive scheme very similar, if not the exact type of a system to what Clint Kubiak's doing. This is a guy who has started multiple games on championship-level teams, played in the Super Bowl, is still only 25 years old. And as you mentioned to me, this is kind of the MO of the 49ers. They draft guys, and then they develop them, and then typically they don't necessarily re-sign offensive linemen. They just draft and develop behind them.
Yeah, I mean, that's when I see the Raiders sign players, immediately people always who is he? What's his PFF grade? And I think that's more of like the people who want to, have the conversations and talk about who this player is. And I think I'm lucky enough, Vinny, you were around it too, that you get a chance to see this guy. And look, previously, before joining the Raiders broadcast team, I was part of the Rams broadcast team. So I saw Spencer Burford, who was out there for the 49ers twice a year on that offensive line. And that offensive line never was truly the problem. They always played well. They were tough. They were physical. He was a part of that offensive line. And I know Tim Ryan, who's part of their radio broadcast team. Burford was a player that at times played well for the 49ers. And they got a lot out of him for a young football player. And yet there was never a sign that they were going to sign him to a long-term deal. So the minute when I see all these free agency guys and, when free agency starts, the minute I look at it, I always say, where does that team usually invest their money? They invest their money in the skill position players. Like, they don't re-sign offensive linemen. I mean, they drafted Mike McGlinchey in the first round, and yet they let him walk in free agency to the Denver Broncos. You know what I mean, Vinny? That's what the 49ers do. So the only person they re-sign is like Trent Williams every year. They always find a way to sign Trent Williams. But other than that, they don't re-sign anybody. And so when I saw Spencer Burford, who was obviously under the tutelage of Clint Kubiak when he was the offensive coordinator there, that was probably one of those situations where you're bringing in a guy who knows the offense, who knows the system, and I kind of laughed because I saw so many people don't know his name and what does a Burford guy do? It's all about JPJ here and this guy's going to be here, and I'm like, just let it all play out, people. Like, just let it literally all play out, because when everybody got the first snapshot, and that's what the OTA was yesterday. Everybody finally got snapshots. We've heard, we've listened. People are, there was rumors, but yesterday was like that first snapshot of OTAs and who are the first 5 offensive linemen. Wait, Burford's at left guard. I'm like, it shouldn't be surprising, but also remember, we're in OTAs. People it's just the first 5 guys that ran out. I tell people, if you think what it looks like now is what it's going to look like come game number 1, September 13th versus the Miami Dolphins, you are mistakenly you don't get it. I mean, last year at this time, I was telling people I didn't even know how to say Caillou Blue Kelly's name, and yet he was your starter coming out week 1. You know what I mean? Like let's just pump our brakes and yes, we got a snapshot. We saw some guys that we haven't seen in Raiders uniforms in Raiders practice. But I'll be honest with you, it's just like it's summer camp, and guys are going to summer school. They're learning, getting some extra work. There's still a long process that has to go with all positions, not just Burford, but with all positions.
Yeah, and here's the thing: if it does end up being that's the starting unit season, at the season opener, this year more than most guys will have earned it. So if that is the case, they're going to earn it because they're not in the business of just handing jobs to anybody. I want to stay along that offensive line real quick too because people they're down on DJ Glaze. He didn't have as good a year last year as he had the year before. And Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers, and I think there's real hope for them. But in a case like DJ Glaze, and you could throw Jackson Powers Johnson in there as well. Mentioned earlier, Kirk, this is amazing to me in a bad way. They're going on to their fourth offensive coordinator, and they haven't even started their third year officially yet, right? In seasons, there's been changes. Out of season, there's been changes. It's just been constant turnover from a coaching perspective for these young players. And I want to ask you this: you've been through it. What kind of a detriment can that be for a young player that's trying to develop, and every time he turns around, there's a different voice telling him what to do?
I think it's hard for people to understand it with offensive linemen. Like what you're saying is great, Vinny. But I think people don't realize you're an offensive lineman. You just block the guy in front of you. That's what people think. But I think I equate it more to the guy who was drafted in my draft class was Alex Smith, the quarterback, who went through that many different offensive coordinators in his first 5 or 6 years. And everybody's like, oh, he's a bust. He's a bust. And yet he was a pretty darn good quarterback when he got to his later years in San Francisco with Jim Harbaugh as his head coach. But then he goes to Kansas City, and Kansas City became a perennial playoff team. People look at Kansas City now as a model franchise, but before Alex Smith got there, they were the Raiders of the AFC West.
They were.
You know what I mean? But Alex Smith got there because he finally had the same coordinator and the same opportunity to learn the offense and really – came into his own. That's one way. I also throw Sam Darnold in that situation as well, because I think people have to realize quarterbacks find a way when the system fits, but more importantly, the message is the same. Now, when you put it to these offensive linemen, like you mentioned, it is very difficult when that message, when that philosophy, when that technique is constantly changing, and the offense is constantly changing, but also to the quarterback. It's constantly changing. That has a lot to do with it. Some people always say, well, the offensive line, well, I've known a lot of quarterbacks who know how to make the offensive line. The quarterback getting rid of the football, that's not a sack. But the quarterback trying to go through progressions that aren't there and hold on to the ball, he gets sacked, that goes on the offensive line. So it kind of goes two-way. It's a two-way street to that. But I think getting the teaching now that this offensive line is getting, and a lot of guys are going to be cross-training. I know everyone's looking at, Trey Zoom's at the right tackle spot, and he's running with the 2s and the 3s. It's a competition for everybody, and that's what I love because Clint Kubiak said it. It will reveal itself. I can't tell you who's going to be where. I can't do that. But when we watch practice, when training camp comes, when the preseason comes, the preseason games, the starters or the guys who are going to be playing the most will reveal itself by their play on the field.
We're talking to Kirk Morrison, the great Kirk Morrison, former Raider linebacker, and I want to talk to you about defense here in a second, but something caught my eye yesterday, my ear really, and that was Clint Kubiak talking about Ashton Jeanty and about, I want to put more pressure on Ashton Jeanty. I want to get more out of Ashton Jeanty because the implication being, you draft Mike Washington. Is there going to be kind of a co-thing going on and trying to take some pressure off of Ashton Jeanty? He's like, heck no, I want to get even more out of him, which I'm all about. And I know Ashton's all about that as well. So as you sit here today, I know it's hard to predict, but do you see an Ashton Jeanty more being used as a Christian McCaffrey or more the way Kenneth Walker was used in Seattle where there was kind of a code thing going on?
I say a mix of both.
Okay.
I think for Ashton, this is a new offense for him, but I think more importantly for what I think Clint Kubiak wants to do with Ashton is make sure that he's getting the ball in advantageous spots, meaning that his ability to see what's in front of him and not be hit in the backfield or not having things cloudy, right? I had a running back coach who used to always say, running backs sometimes have to be able to run through the smoke, right? You got to be a firefighter. You know what I mean? Right. We run to the fire, not away from the fire. And so too many times I saw Jeanty having to run away from the fire instead of run through the fire, run through the smoke. That's what I want to see from him this year, where things will be more defined and more clear, and him getting to the second and third level. We just didn't see that, but I think that's why Clint feels like there's another level to Ashton that we never got a chance to see last year, and he's going to give him opportunities to get that one-on-one on a backside safety or a backside linebacker and let him do what he did best over at Boise State.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, so I know you got to run, so we're going to take a rain check on talking about the defense, but I do want to get your thoughts down the road.
I got a couple minutes for you. You good.
All right, so real quick, the 3-4 defense, right? You've played in multiple defenses. How does that change what some of these players are going to do, specifically at linebacker, how that's going to look in terms of going from the 4-3 to the 3-4?
Yeah, I have to see it more. Because everyone hears 3-4. I've seen it different ways. There's like a traditional 3-4, and then there's another thing that I played in college, which is basically an under front, where you just walk the Sam linebacker from off the ball to on the ball, right? It was more of a bigger body and an edge rusher type that can do both. And that's where you create a 5-man front, but it has 4-3 principles. And I think that's what I think a lot of people have to realize, what I think Robbie Leonard is going to do with this defense. It's going to be considered 3-4 by some, but I see it more as a 4-3 under, where you're just putting the linebacker who usually plays off the ball, you put it on the ball. Now you're putting a Kwity Paye on the ball. On the ball, but maybe he may do some things off the ball and drop in space. And you're creating Max Crosby as a wild card, as a joker player, meaning that he is going to be a true defensive end. Just get off the ball and do what you do, but he may be doing it from an outside linebacker spot. Okay, he may be like a Terrell Suggs type of thing, right? And that's Robbie Leonard. He knows that types of defense. So, I need to get more snapshots of it. But I think that's why so many people heard 3-4 and they immediately says the Raiders need a stout defensive tackle nose guard. And I'm saying, but that may not be the defense. Like, they like Adam Butler. They like, Tonka. They like JJ. They like the young guys who they drafted last year, right? And I think that's where you're going to see, can those guys hold up in the run game? That's all. They want to see, can these guys hold up in double teams? That's all. There's going to be some things that we'll see throughout training camp, and I'll make sure I find you, Vinny, because that's what I'm looking at. They've got a lot of guys that they're going to be able to rotate through, and they're just going to create some different fronts, but it's not going to be a traditional 3-4 like people think it's going to be. And how often are you really in base anyway, man? It's always 4 down, 2 linebackers, and I know it's a great talking point. They're going 3-4. They're going 3-4, and I'm like, all right, okay. It's just like last year. Everybody's like, oh, my God, 12 personnel. Like, really? How much 12 personnel we run last year? Like, like, people, just pump your brakes. I know we get excited, but, like, it will reveal itself. Like, that's why I love Clint Kubiak, man. I'll leave you with this one, though, Vinny. I love hearing Clint Kubiak talk. I've developed a relationship with him and just talking ball. That's it. When I call him, when I see him, we just talk football. Like, I finally got him to laugh the other day because we went to the Silver and Black Gala. I saw him, and I was like, had no idea. He was a big Elton John fan. Elton John got you to smile and laugh and have a good time. He was like, you could just tell he wanted to be grinding some tape. But
of course,
everything that he says is so true, man. And that's what I love. That's why you see the players gravitate. He's not coming out telling you, hey, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to earn it. We're going to work. We're going to put the time in. And when we do that, everything will reveal itself. I can't give you a timeline. I can't give you a date. It will just reveal itself. And that just speaks to who he is as a head coach. And I just can't wait to see how things continue to evolve. So we got a snapshot yesterday. I'll be at mandatory minicamp. That's the next time we'll get a snapshot. And you just kind of go from there, because I'm telling you, it'll be something else during mandatory minicamp, right? So
absolutely, and I'm looking forward to talking to you at mandatory minicamp. So save some time for me over there on that sideline. Kirk Morrison, thank you so much, and I tell everybody, really appreciate it. And tell everybody, that he's somebody to keep to listen to. Kirk Morrison knows.
Absolutely, man. I got to talk to you about this great structure of an ownership group that the Raiders have. Remember?
That's
that's a whole nother story that I'm excited to talk about because it's good, man. We're in a good spot right now, Vinny.
1,000%. I completely agree. Thank you to Kirk Morrison. And I appreciate all of our callers, all of our listeners. Jessie, Merrick, thank you so much for joining us as we prepare to hand it off to Q Myers and Unnecessary Roughness at the top of the hour. But honestly, Kirk Morrison is as good as it gets in this business. I love listening to him call college games. Unfortunately, I'm usually working the game, so I don't get a chance to hear him on the broadcast for the Raider side of things. But every Monday morning, we have him and Jason Horowitz, and they're great calls from Sundays or Thursdays or whenever the Raiders are playing. So it's always great to catch up with him and get his insight. And I think it is worth repeating in terms of getting that continuity now, getting that constant message that the Raiders are going to be getting from a Clint Kubiak and, right on down the line on his assistant coaches. I feel like this is going to be here for the long haul. He's going to be here for the long haul, building and bonding with a Fernando Mendoza. But every player on this team, especially those young players, deserves a chance to be able to really sink their teeth into whatever this system is that they're teaching, the scheme that they're teaching, and let it be the scheme that they're going to play for a good long time, because that just hasn't been the case. And can you imagine starting a new job and your boss changes and the direction changes and the philosophy changes and how you go about doing your job? Oh no, that's not. Well, but I thought you told me yesterday. No, that was the other guy. We're doing it this way this time, and then it changes again. A couple months down the line. Who likes that? I mean, that's not getting the most out of you as a worker when you're having to think all the time or having to adjust all the time. You want to be able to come to your job and develop and hone your skills and be really good at whatever it is that you do. So, here's again hoping that this is here for the long haul, because players like DJ Glaze and Jackson Powers Johnson and Charles Grant and Fernando Mendoza and Brock Bowers and Ashton Jeanty are going to benefit from that. We've all seen the great organizations do it through that consistency, and that the messaging never changes, the scheme rarely changes. Sometimes you got to make adjustments, obviously, and you got to tinker with what you have. I was having a conversation with Sean McVay not long ago talking about 13 personnel, which his team went to last year kind of out of necessity. It was they wanted to be better in short yardage situations, and so they started getting bigger with their 13 personnel, 3 tight ends, and all of a sudden they said, we could throw out of this, and they started throwing out of it. And he was telling me, we've been cooking up new things to do out of 13 personnel. We're just kind of scratching the surface with that. So yeah, you're going to change it up, but it's the same voice, the same principles, a lot of the cases the same type of technique that you're developing these players with. So hopefully, again, that becomes the case for the Raiders. I want to say thank you to Jessie Merrick. I want to say thank you to Kirk Morrison. I want to say thank you to Clay Morrison for holding it down. We'll be back at it tomorrow, 12 to 2 p.m. on Friday to close this week out. And don't forget to stay on Raider Nation Radio, because the great Q Myers is coming up with Unnecessary Roughness from 2 to 5 p.m. Check you guys out tomorrow on the Morning Tailgate Show and the JT the Brick Show tomorrow.